Hello and a big warm welcome to this week's edition of the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, just before we go into the episode, I wanted to just tell you a bit about my YouTube channel. If you haven't already been over there, the handle is at Medium Jason Paul. You can find it just in the show notes. And in addition to the full interviews where some people like to watch the interviews rather than listen to them, which you can do over on the YouTube channel. There's also all of the meditations, which lots of the different guests who've been on have been kind enough to do meditations. But in addition to all of that, I'm going to be releasing videos over the coming weeks and months as we go into summer about life experiences that I've had, lessons that I've learned, things that I've been through, learnings. I'm going to be posting updates about how my mediumship is progressing, and you can find all of that over there. All you need to do is click the subscribe button and it will tell you on YouTube when a new video is released. Now, let's get on with this week's episode. So I'm talking to William Bloom, who is an absolute trailblazer in the world of spirituality. He is a modern Western mystic and considered by many to be Britain's leading and most experienced mind, body, spirit teacher. William is a pioneering figure in the realms of spirituality, holistic wellness and personal development. He was born in central London in 1948 and his early life was shaped by a rich tapestry of experiences. From swinging London's flower power movement to his transformative spiritual retreat in the Saharan Berbers, William's extensive career includes founding the groundbreaking Open Gate imprint at Macmillan, where he published books for iconic figures like Lenny Bruce and even achieved a bestseller with a biography of Elvis Presley. However, William shifted from publishing and counterculture activism to academia, earning a doctorate in political psychology from the London School of Economics. However, his passion for exploring consciousness and spirituality led him to abandon an academic career in favour of working with special needs communities and diving deeper into spiritual teachings. He founded the Alternatives programme at St James's Church, Piccadilly, which has become a central hub for holistic and spiritual education in London, attracting thousands annually. A lifelong journey through various cultures and philosophical explorations has enriched William's teachings, which he generously shares through his books, workshops and lectures. Some of his books include Feeling Safe, The Endorphin Effect, The Power of Modern Spirituality and Psychic Protection, just to name a few. I absolutely love the conversation with William, and I think you're going to. So, William, firstly, it's an absolute honour to have you on the Soul Sync podcast. A massive welcome to you.
Well, that's very kind of you, Jason. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Wait, it's lovely to have you here. So, first of all, some people aren't going to know you. Many people will know you. But let's delve in. Tell us a bit about you, your story, and what gives you the experience to talk about some of the things we're going to talk about today.
Yikes. Okay, so let's bring it's almost 7 decades now. I'm in my 70s. Just to kind of squash that down to a few minutes. Childhood, Central London. Dad's a doctor. Dad's a psychiatrist. Didn't believe in anything weird. Thought it was some form of mental illness. Mum was a journalist. She also didn't believe in anything weird. Thought it was a form of delusion. Both of them, though, had just come out of prisoner of war camp. They'd been 3 years in Japanese prisoner of war camp, so they were frozen and a bit traumatized. So I was brought up in a household where there was a lot of love towards me. I was cared for, but from the age of about 5 or 6, I was having experiences of the subtle worlds. I was having experiences of being able to feel very quickly whether somebody had a good vibe or a bad vibe. And we used to go to the park every day, almost every day. And in the park, I would discern, oh, this tree's got an interesting vibe. This tree hasn't got an interesting. This tree got a bit of a dodgy vibe. And I was just aware of atmospheres and the subtle worlds. And because my parents were both kind of intellectual skeptics who thought this kind of stuff that we're into is slightly mad, I recognized very early not to talk to them about it, because if I did talk to them about it, they would kind of do this kind of patronizing. Oh, there. Yeah, of course that. Yeah, it's not really true, but but it was very real for me. So I stopped. I didn't talk about it with them. In my late teens, um, these inner experiences got stronger, and it was the 60s, so I was also experimenting with hallucinant psychedelics and stuff, which
Hmm.
opened things up even more. And I decided to leave a mainstream career in publishing and novel writing. I didn't go to uni. Often say that I did my A levels in joint rolling instead. Um,
Ah, ah.
I'm probably being too honest with you now. And
Oh no! I think the more honest, the better. It gives context, and I can assure you, William, that part of my upbringing was very similar. So we want to hear it all.
there you go. Well, do people know you were a cop? I once thought about becoming a policeman as well, actually. Uh,
Did you?
yeah, yeah.
And what stopped
Um,
you? Common sense, probably. I don't.
it was, I didn't lean into it, but I thought about it. And my best friend at the time did become a copper. And he got thrown out because drunk one night, he decided that he wanted to find out where the London double-decker buses really could skid without not falling over. So he stole a London double-decker bus, took it to one of the airfields somewhere in Sussex, and was caught careering around.
I used to hear a lot of stories like this. When I joined, they used to talk about, the day before this and the day before CCTV and the day before vehicle tracking. I used to hear about all sorts of shenanigans. But
Yeah.
sadly, I've not got any stories like that from my time
Oh,
in the
all right.
police.
Anyway, back to me. 25, left my career, went and did 2 years spiritual retreat. I lived off grid in the mountains south of Marrakesh, totally drug free, just meditating and praying and
How old was you when you
experimenting
did
with
that?
hmm,
How old was you when you went and did that?
25.
It's quite a thing to go and do at 25. What made you want to go and do that? Was two
Um,
years the plan at the start? Or was this a week that
n-
overstayed?
no, I was quite successful in my London career. I
Hmm.
was by 24, I was the youngest commissioning editor in publishing. I'd had 3 novels published. I was a clever boy, despite the fact that I failed my A levels. I was a very clever boy, and I did very, very well. And it was meaningless to me. It was kind of very hollow. And
Why
I
was
went
that?
into psychotherapy when I was 21, 22 for identity crisis. Not sure who I was, where I was going, and 3 years psychoanalysis. I give thanks for that every day because the guy I saw was just a lovely, lovely man, um, who was he was 80 when I went to see him, and
Oh wow.
he was just very welcoming and affectionate, and at the same time quite sharp, really sharp. And if he caught any of my bullshit, he'd just finger it immediately. And at 25, I went, this is all meaningless, and I wanted to meet spirits, so I planned it. And went away for 2 years up into the mountains off grid and met with spirits, so to speak. Had a huge opening experience that went on for months up in the mountains, and then crashed with hepatitis B, which almost killed me. Doctors thought I was going to die, and that just kind of slowed. With what great gift, great wonderful illness, slowed me down completely. Took me about 5, 6 years to integrate that whole experience, and after that, into my 30s, I was kind of doing 2 careers at the same time. I went to uni for the first time
Hmm.
and went to the London School of Economics, ended up doing a doctorate there and teaching there. And my doctorate was published by Cambridge University Press. So it was kind of that intellectual, respectable side. And the other part of me was still deep into all the metaphysics and psychic and esoteric stuff. And bit by bit, the career, I never intended to be a teacher or an author in this field, but um, what initially happened was a little network of people who understood that I understood about psychic protection because I'd had to do it for myself, coming back from living in the mountains to London. And people asked me, "Oh, come and give us a little, do a little workshop for us on it." And I went, well, I'm not a teacher. But I went and taught it, and people found it useful. And then I was also working with nature spirits and the angelic realm in ceremony and that kind of stuff. And people said, "Oh, why don't you come and teach us that?" And we were just got a load of weirdos going to turn up. I'm not sure I want to do that. But in actual fact, they were very nice, intelligent folk that turned up. And one of the things I learned, having been on my own for most of the journey, was that in the field of spirituality are the nicest possible people you can find.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
And you've got the mainstream world that can be very skeptical about us, right? And then actually in the world of metaphysics, psychic stuff, mystic spirituality, where you don't belong to like a mainstream religion because it's too controlling and they tell you what to think, where you actually want to explore and be curious on your own. In that world, there's a load of lovely people. Hearts are in
I
the
have
right
to
place.
agree. I until I sort of found my tribe, so to speak, I think I had a few years of not feeling like I had any friends, but it's because I didn't feel that I related to anyone. It strikes me when you tell me this very brief whistle stop tour about your life, it feels like a lot of your life has just kind of happened by accident. It feels like things have just kind of come about. Is that because you've been following your intuition? Would you? Because it seems like you never set out to do this or write books.
Yeah.
What? How's that? Is there any? Does that resonate with you?
No, it's not actually, because it feels
Yeah.
like I made very clear decisions. Like, for example, when I decided to go on retreat for a couple of years, it took me 18 months to diplomatically close down the job I was in and the business I was running. It was very, very carefully done. So maybe at one level I was following an intuition, but that intuition had to land in a very logical and careful place of decision making. And I look back and there were certain things that when my career developed into being a teacher of spirituality and metaphysics, that coincided with me writing a couple of things that nobody wanted to publish. So there was a part of me wanting to go in one direction and failing and leaving me with no alternative of this other direction. So you might want to call that intuition, as if it, on the other hand, I could say, then what is above and my soul were very clear about, no, William, don't do that, do this,
And it's crazy because you've gone on to write 26 books.
Yeah,
and it hasn't stopped since then. I wanted to. So go on, William.
No, I was just going to say, I sometimes look at that as just an expression of nervous energy, actually. Because I was writing from the age of about 10, 11. I produced my first little manuscript when I was about 12 years old. And I remember my dad looking at it, story, and saying, "Who did you copy this from?" And at one level, I was insulted. And at another level, I was just really, really pleased. It was so good that he thought I'd copied it,
What's made you such a successful writer?
Well, I'm moderately successful.
I would say you're successful.
Well, yeah, maybe. I tell you what, I genuinely think.
On the topics, most certainly, because it's.
I tell you what I think. I think, and I've always said this as a joke, but when I was a mature student at the London School of Economics, it coincided when the first word processors came in, first computer word processing, because up until that point, you had to use carbon paper. So you'd have a typewriter with 3 sheets of paper in it with carbon paper, blah, 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 blah. And the moment I was a student still, the moment I heard about word processing in a computer, I managed to, because I was a mature student, I managed to pretend I was a staff lecturer. I got access to the word processing staff room, right? And wrote
that was a very good place to be back there.
It was, but when I tell that story, somebody said, what was that about? And I said, well, actually, I think I remember when we were still chiseling out messages on stone and someone turned up with rolled up papyrus and said, look, you can write with ink with whatever the stain is on the papyrus. Like, all right, I'm giving up the chiseling on stone for writing on this. And then the papyrus gave way to the first printing works. So I think I have a past life history of being a scribe.
Kind of makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah, so I'm just like, because we were talking about motorbikes earlier before we started the actual recording of the podcast. And one of the things I found is that everybody I know who rides a motorbike, if you do any kind of regression or past life conversation with them, they always remember being horsemen or horsewomen.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, it kind of makes sense as well.
Yeah, there's a certain logic to these things.
I'm sure there is. Some of the stories I've heard about past lives really have surprised me. I want to jump in then to, well, there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about, William. I could go in a million different directions here, but I want to get straight into what we talked about before we started recording, which was discernment, because I do think that it's an interesting topic, and I know it's something that you've got views on. Tell us about that.
The angle I come at it from is not the angle of the spiritualist church or mediumship. It comes from having been in the business now of being a coach, a teacher of spiritual practice for quite a few decades now. One of the things I know for certain is that in my classes, in my groups, maybe 1 in 10 is going to be going through a mental health crisis. And one of the ways that we can interpret that is that as they open to spirit, their nervous system becomes overwhelmed by all the new energy and information that's pouring into them. And their psyche, their brains need to be able to integrate that experience. When people have that experience so intensely that it's a crisis, they can exhibit symptoms that are similar to psychosis. They become very speedy, very hyper, and delusional, and they kind of lose the plot for a while and maybe can't cope with normal life. And in a healthy crisis that lasts maybe 4 to 12 weeks, and then they start to calm down and integrate.
I had psychosis myself, actually, 4
did
years
you?
ago.
You
Yeah,
okay?
I did. Yeah, I'm fine now. Still, God, it's a horrible experience. I completely lost all. Well, do you know what? I really struggled to explain psychosis because it's very hard. Obviously you understand it. For me, how it happened was real life was intertwined with just a crazy layer of reality. So, for instance, it was back when the election was happening, when there was a hung parliament and with the big national election, and I got it into my mind that the whole election was set up, and it was the government were lying to the public, and then it became this big, far-reaching thing. But I do think some of my psychosis there was an underlying kind of. It felt to me like some things which I were seeing, some connections I were making were actually there, but it was a horrible experience, and it went on for me. I must have been 4 months until it started, but it wasn't. It was very, very, very gradual. I started realizing that actually all these things mustn't have happened, and then that in itself was horrible because I had to come to the realization that actually I did have psychosis. At the very start, people were saying, "Oh, you got psychosis," but I was just thinking that they were crazy for not being able to see the things that I was seeing. So yeah, it was. But I have seen. I can't remember where I've read it, but I have seen about that link between psychosis and
spiritual crisis.
And I was sort of it even got me thinking, oh, was there an element of that with me? But I obviously you're never going to know, are you, necessarily?
Well, sometimes you can discern if you look at the 6 months before the crisis whether you'd intensified any mediumistic practices or meditations or fasting or anything like
Okay,
that?
I can safely say no.
All right, fine.
I
Well,
think that happened in abundance after William when the
all
voting.
right. So it was you waking up to a degree.
But it was, yes, when
Yeah.
because actually it was after that. It sort of drove me on a catalyst. Well, it all started for me with me and my mum having a conversation on holiday about death, and I said, no, I don't want to talk about death. It scares me, and then that got me starting to study near-death experiences, and then I just couldn't stay away. The more I found out, and the more I researched, and then here I am doing a podcast. But anyway, this isn't about me, William. We're meant to be talking about you.
No, yeah, but it's actually very relevant because what you're describing is exactly kind of what I wanted to talk about, which is that spirituality is a path of opening up. It's a path of opening up to a much more intimate and deeper connection with spirit. And it's a path of becoming aware of subtle energies. And if people open up too fast or open up and they don't have a balanced personality in the first place, as they get this inflow of new information and new experience, kind of cosmic electricity coming into them, they can go off on one. They can go off on one. And if that person, for example, already had tendencies towards being a bully or towards being flaky or towards being manipulative, then that opening up can just kind of amplify, turn the volume up on those negative aspects. At the same time, of course, we know full well that for most of us, it's graceful and beautiful and wonderful and extraordinary, and thank you very much, right? But so when it comes to mediumship and spiritualism, we're in an area where historically you've got a couple of problems. One, you've got a load of shysters who pretended to be mediums and just to make some dosh, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of, and then you've got folk who are genuinely deluded.
Yes.
You got the criminals and you've got the deluded, right? And then in parallel with that, you've got the rest of us who are trying to bring some order into our lives and be of service.
Yes.
Be of service through having this connection, right? But it got so bad that, as you know, in the UK, at any rate, you cannot advertise that you are doing mediumistic work unless you say it's for entertainment purposes. You can't say it's for therapeutic purposes because that's against the law in this country. You're
And
thinking
what's your
something.
view?
I'm watching
Yeah,
your facial expression.
my first question is going to be: do you think that's a good thing?
What, the law?
Yes.
No, I think it's awful.
Okay. Why
Because
so?
because I would prefer a world where psychics and mediums are so well trained and of such a high ethical standard that they are consulted with as much normality as you might go and see the dentist or your GP. Edgar Cayce, the greatest psychic in the United States, the most well-known psychic in the United States, he said the future he wanted was that every village and town had a respected citizen who was a psychic, and people could go to this person for a conversation to get some advice. So I'll give you a very abrupt example. If a woman, for example, is considering early termination of a pregnancy for whatever reasons, right? At the moment in this country, she needs to have a conversation with two medical doctors who will agree that it would be for her health, for the sake of her health, the early termination is appropriate. I, for example, would like to see in that conversation a wise and grounded psychic.
I think the world would be a much better place.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's got so badly managed in this country, so badly managed in this country. The culture of mediumship was so badly managed. I'm not saying that mediums themselves are bad. I'm just saying the culture was so badly managed that that horrible piece of legislation had to be passed, saying, no, no, you can't advertise yourself as therapeutic or healing. What you have to do is say that you're for entertainment. And I don't, I in my gut, just as a gut instinct, I didn't like that. I understood why mainstream society was doing it, but I didn't like it.
How have we got into this mess, do you think? How have we got to this place?
I don't know. I think I'm going to be very opinionated here, and
Please, yes, we love opinions.
yeah, but I'm not sure I've got the evidence to substantiate the opinion. Just to say, right?
That's okay. I'm not going to ask you for it, but go on.
I think it's because this world of spiritualism and mediumship in this country and in the United States was full of people who were psychologically insecure, slightly pompous, and found their status in their proclamations of what was coming through from the other side, right?
Mm.
And if I then said to them, no, dismantle all that, that's just another aspect of old-fashioned patriarchy, right? What you need to be demonstrating is that, yeah, you are getting messages from the other side, but in parallel with that, you're also deeply surrendered to highest level of ethics, highest connection with source God, the great mystery, and that on a daily basis you are reflecting, thinking about, contemplating whether what you're doing and saying is true and right, and you're discerning. And day by day you're going, whoops, maybe that was slightly off. Maybe I need, what are my discernment skills? How am I assessing what I'm doing? Like teachers do and therapists do, and people in all professions that are to do with personal development, people have reflective practice.
I guess the difficulty with mediumship is, I guess it obviously it is a healing practice and it has the ability to heal people if used correctly. But what you're saying is about mediumships being deeply rooted in spirituality and having that. I understand what you're saying and it makes total sense. I'm just trying to think how. Okay, I think your idea is great, and I totally agree with it. How would that be rolled out? How would that be policed, and how would you even get some kind of accreditation in order to say
Like
that you are?
it would be built into the training. It would be built into the training from the very beginning of somebody going into training in mediumship. Part of the training would involve, let's just pause for a moment and check whether this is bullshit or not. You know, basically, right? Just let's just how and what how would you have a conversation with a psychiatrist about this? You know, an atheistic
Well,
psychiatrist. Let's up your game. Let's up your game and be reflective and intelligent and wise and open-hearted and open-minded about it, and have that in from the very, very beginning, so that people recognize it's an enjoyable conversation. It's an enjoyable. I'm very lucky. My wife, Sabrina, is one of the best psychics in the world, actually. She's currently retired. One of the great, when we got together decades ago,
I like the fact you say currently retired. It sounds like that's up for negotiation, William.
she had fibromyalgia and is just recovering from it.
Oh,
It's good though, good news.
that is good.
But one of the things that we liked about her was we could both have a sense of having perceived something or channeled something, and we would go, was that me making it up or was it real? What did you get? So there were and we had other groups of friends who would also be tuning into the same thing, and it would be an enjoyable conversation exploring the inner worlds and at the same time recognizing the foibles and frailty of the human psyche. And it was like being open about the fact I could be making it up, I could be projecting it,
Yeah.
discerning between imagination and genuine picking up messages.
Do you, when you do get a legitimate message, is there ever instances now where you still have to do that kind of check with yourself, or
I
are
I
you
I have my bullshit scanners on all the time.
okay?
I
From the moment
because
you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, they're on.
yeah, ish. Yes, I mean you were a policeman for a while out on the streets, and you just stay alert. If you don't stay alert, you're vulnerable.
Yes.
It's a
Yes,
simple
very true.
it's as simple as that. So I don't think I don't think it's a major spiritual skill that reserved for saints.
Mm.
I just think it's intelligent
Well, I'm
practice.
naturally a cynic, and even with my mediumship, and unless I've kind of seen it and had evidence of it, then I'm not going to necessarily believe. Well, it took me a very long time to believe in the spirit world, and even once I'd felt it, I couldn't believe it. I still needed more proof, and I think my desire for so much proof is probably what slowed me down at times. Um, do you think we'll ever get to that place of which you describe where mediums are held in the right regard?
I really hope so. I really, really hope so. Um, I was kind of hoping it was going to be happening these decades now, but at the moment, in the naivete of flower power, and then it was, yeah, no, it's all gone to pot, hasn't it, at the moment? Why not? I think it's worth holding as a deeply felt soul inspired project. That's what we want. We want such good mediums, such good psychics that they are
Mm.
integrated into social care, integrated into big decisions. Yeah,
It feels to me that it does feel like people, and I don't know about obviously we both got totally different perspectives, but it does feel to me that we're moving in a place where I think people are really craving spirituality. They're really craving to know more. I think in the way I see it is I think that people are getting to a place where they don't want to be glued to mobiles, TVs, internets, and all of this all the time. I think people are starting to wonder, what is the purpose? Why am I here? And people are starting to ask more questions. Do you think that's happening more now?
I don't know. Um, I genuinely, it felt, how old are you?
I am 36. I had to think about that.
All right. So I felt the same way as you when I was in my 30s. So it might be the naivete of youth, right?
Oh, okay. Potentially,
Well,
potentially.
I think it's the kind of hope that stirs in the hearts of all of us who are involved in this kind of work, actually,
Mm,
what you're saying.
you might
And
be right.
I it's I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I think Facebook and social networks and the way the algorithms work have taken everything back several decades, because instead of encouraging diversity and curiosity into things which you're unfamiliar with and you don't like, it's the algorithms work to herd people together to just meet other people who are similar to themselves. And I think
Yes.
that's been very bad, because the great thing about people who are into spirituality and psychism is we are infinitely curious, because we know that what we see in the three-dimensional solid world is only a tiny part of the picture. There's this whole other multi-dimensional cosmos, and you don't get to explore it unless you're curious and inquiring and have an open mind and an open heart. And that's what I'm looking for in people, that they have an open mind and an open heart, and they have that watchful curiosity where the bullshit scanners are switched on, but their hearts are open. So they're compassionate and to service. but their hearts
Mm.
are open and they're watchful. And that's what I think you and I have in common in terms of what we want and hope for and think could be like. And I
Do
definitely
you know, I
go
think
ahead.
mediums and psychics really should be. I, I do think you're right in what you're saying. I think they should be in all of those situations, and I think the world would be a lot better place if they were trusted and they were as accessible. Um, what obviously you talk all over the place and teach. What are some of the most common misconceptions or challenges you encounter when you talk about spirituality? And I was going to say, and how do you address them? But I'm starting to get a bit of an idea of yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what that means.
Yes.
I tell you that I tell you the biggest thing. We're moving away. The psychism and mediumship. I want to put that to one side, and then the spirituality.
Yes.
And they're for me they're separate things to a degree. For me, spirituality is about every individual's internal personal development to a state of being profoundly, totally connected with spirit, absolutely mindful and alert and conscious, and with a big open wide heart. You know,
Mm.
that's where we're journeying to. And psychism and mediumship supports that sometimes, and sometimes is a kind of Disneyland sidetrack. In the context of spirituality, the biggest error, this is me being judgmental, opinionated, the biggest error I keep finding is that people think that spiritual enlightenment or being spiritually developed comes in like in a flash of lightning and suddenly you wake up and blah, blah, blah. Whereas for me, increasingly, what I'm looking for is that somebody's soul, somebody's spirit soul is incarnating properly into them. And people will know when their soul is incarnating properly into them because they will go into this state. I'm now about to describe the state of being someone whose soul is present in them.
Please
They are
do.
calm, relaxed in their body, at ease in their body, calm, at ease in their body, watchful. Their hearts are open. They are wise in the way that they don't need to know everything. And there's a caring vibe coming from them. That's when they're in a state of watchful love. That's their soul present. And I believe that many, many people have that experience, but they don't have it validated by spiritual teachers. That's
Mm.
and that for me is that's the experience that I want to see validated. That and there are over and over again in classes and conversations, I'm meeting people who have that experience. They're lovely, lovely people who think that to be spiritual is to have white light coming out of their ears and to have
To sit on a
lightning.
cushion in the lotus position for
Yeah,
4 hours a day.
but to have electricity around their head and all that
Yes.
kind of stuff. And they nobody said to them, no, listen, when you're calm and wise, you know, there used to be those lovely mediums psychics who basically you wouldn't have a cup of tea with them and you were much more interested in their loving vibe than in whatever they were channeling. Right. I found that
Mm.
several times. I just wanted to be near their loving, heartfelt vibe. And they would channel something. I go, well, that's interesting. I mean, there were a couple of them where I even said to them, listen, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm really not interested in the great being that you're channeling, right? And these are famous channelers. I said, I'm not interested in the being a channel. It's you. I really like your vibe, right?
What did they say
And
to
you,
that, Willie? I bet they hadn't heard that very often before.
no, they hadn't because everybody else was worshiping them, right? And
Yes.
they or was frightened of them. And actually, you could just see them go, oh, I'm getting a real stroke now. I'm getting a genuine appreciation for who I really am. But they themselves had not recognized that when they were in that state, they were evolved,
I've never heard.
old
You'd
souls.
think on the Soul Sync podcast I would have had a similar description of spirituality, but I haven't. But everything you've said, I completely feel exactly the same. I think you articulated that absolutely beautifully.
Yay. Thank you. It's kind of obvious, isn't it? Once you start talking about it, it's kind of obvious.
Do you know what? Sometimes I realise on this journey is some of the most simplest and simply stated things that I've heard have had some of the most profound effect on me. But it's the journey that you've had to go through even to get to that level of understanding. And to you, it's simple. But to so many people, they're not even aware that they're kind of living that life, like you've said. So it is interesting, and some of the most profound things I've heard recently have been very, very simple, and it's just kind of struck me. I wanted to ask you because there's so many books that you've wrote, but the one that keeps jumping out at me is the Endorphin Effect. I know we're never going to even unpack this, the slightest of all of what the book contains, but firstly, what's the book all about, and what made you write this particular book?
I was watching a Horizon documentary on BBC Telly 20 years ago, whenever it was. And it was to do with the people who got the Nobel Prize for science medicine. They were talking about endorphins. And the endorphins are the neuropeptides, the hormones that are produced in every cell of your body. And they're responsible for the actual feelings of relaxation, well-being, flexibility, and all the rest of it. And the guy with the white coat and the stethoscope and the clipboard under his arm said, very seriously, when asked who consistently produced the most endorphins, right? Just to say, endo produced in your body, orphin, morphine produced in your body. It's a good feeling when they're produced. He said the people who seem to have the most endorphins produced by them they seem to have a little smile on their face most of the time, right? He said this really seriously, and I immediately thought of, as a meditator, I've had a practice meditation, but I immediately thought that's what we do in meditation: smile, gentle, compassionate equanimity, detached, smiling to oneself. And I went, okay, so when I'm sitting in meditation with that little inner contentment, the reason it feels so good in my body is because the endorphins are flowing. So what's happening in your body when you're having an agreeable thought, what's happening in your body when you're having an agreeable emotion, what's happening in your body when you're having an agreeable encounter, you know it's agreeable because your body feels good. It's a feeling. And that feeling is created by the production of endorphins. There are other neuropeptides, hormones involved, oxytocin, etc.
Yes.
But the major one is endorphins. They're produced in every cell of the body, not just in the brain or a particular gland. And so I became very interested in the spiritual practices that trigger the production of endorphins.
You've mentioned meditation. What other practices bring the endorphins out in us?
Anything you enjoy.
Oh, it's really is that?
Yeah, it's. I remember I was sitting in a workshop once, and there were these kind of boffiny types not getting it, and somebody in the workshop said, "You're not getting it because it's too simple for you, right? And because it's too enjoyable, right? Like
That's funny.
when you smile, when you feel good, that's endorphins. So one of the things that I say in the book is you need to identify the things that make you feel good. This has now become part of positive psychology generally. You need to identify the things that make you feel good and You then need to repeat doing them. You identify the things you feel and repeat them, do them, because they're the ones that make you feel good. And there are certain practices from meditation that you can use to ramp up the experience. One of them being, we call it soaking in the hot tub of the goddess, where you
That
just,
sounds rather nice. That sounds
yeah,
like
yeah,
something
well,
I'd want to do on an evening.
yeah, it's just like, when you lie in a bath and you could get in a bath and you can be quick in and out, or you can lie in a bath and at a certain point you can go, oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to relax more deeply into it. I'm just going to let go, right? And there's a letting go and an absorbing. And that's kind of what can happen in meditation as well. There's a certain point where you go, oh, I'm going to just relax more deeply. Other people are familiar with it from making love. There's a certain point where they just go, oh, I'm going to relax it. Or on holiday, the 10th day of holiday, people suddenly go, oh, this is what it feels like to be relaxed, So it's like, and there's also ways of using your breath to deepen the experience, surrendering, yielding to the experience. And from a spiritual perspective, a couple of things are going on. One is you're activating your higher mind because that's guiding the whole process. And secondly, when your body is at ease because you feel good and the endorphins are flowing, it is 1,000 times easier to experience your connection with source, with spirit.
Oh, interesting.
Because if you're frozen or unhappy or whatever it is, then your body is in a state of tension and it's difficult to feel the great ocean of good energy.
You're just making me think about all the times when I first was trying to meditate and I couldn't really get my head around it. And because I've go from rushing, right, it's 8 o'clock, right, I need to meditate now. I started at 8 o'clock. And I'm just, no way am I in the right frame of mind to be beginning. So that was a lesson I had to learn. Asking you, so obviously, having been in this world for decades, what practices do you sort of incorporate into your life now? What do you do to ensure that you stay pumping with good endorphins? I'm trying to think, from all these practices and all these things that you've learned over all these years, what do you do now? What's kind of like your spiritual hygiene routine?
As I wake up, I stretch into my feet and toes and say hello to my body and check in how it is. I say hello to my body, and I'm immediately sending messages through my neuroendocrinal system that say to the vehicle, the temple that my consciousness sits in, hi, I like you. I'm looking after you today. That's number one. I'm in my temple. Two,
interesting.
look out the window. Hello, sky. Hello, God. Hello, everything. Three, I do housework to start the day to move my body, which makes me a wonderful husband, I'm told.
A wonderful husband with good endorphins, it sounds like, in a very happy mood.
Tootling around, cleaning for 20 minutes. Then I sit for an hour and I give myself an hour because it takes me sometimes 20 minutes, what I call clearing my desk. There's a whole load of thoughts about life and work and jobs and money and relationships. I want to be able to sort them out, feel into them, contemplate them. And I feel that to be part of my work day, actually. So that's why I sit for an hour and there's 20 minutes of just, okay, this is what's going on in this relationship. This is the work I've got to do later today. It's a great place for planning.
I love the fact that your meditation practice starts with thinking about things to allow yourself to quiet.
Yeah, 100%. Because that's the stuff that's going on in people's minds anyway. Yeah. And good meditation is like there's a great metaphor, which is you're the best possible host at the biggest possible party. You just allow it to happen. And then when you get, all right, I've been thinking about those new pair of shoes a little bit too long. Let's just put them to the side. And then I think I think the biggest skill that people need for meditation is just to be patient. That's the biggest skill. Be patient. Posture is not important be comfortable. And then day by day, you get to know yourself and your body. And, oh, this is what my breath does when I do this. And this is, oh, look, I've got some anxiety arising. What should I do with it? Okay, I'll try breathing into it. I'll say hello to it. But it's patience, and I think it's quite good to learn how to be a kind of psychotherapist to oneself, listen to what's going on, and have a compassionate relationship with oneself, and notice little subtle sensations and all that kind of stuff. But it's patience and regularity. And the best thing about it is that as you chill out and go into that space, it's much easier to feel your connection with God, spirit, the cosmic energy, Buddha consciousness, whatever you want to call it. It's so much easier to feel it. And so I'm happy to spend quite a lot of time just bobbing along in that space.
I'm not surprised. Do you know what? When you explain these things as well, it is funny, isn't it? How so many of us just go through life uh, without even really taking a moment to stop about how do we do these. Someone said something interesting to me the other day about sleep. You know, the amount of us have never really thought about, oh, how do we sleep? Or what's the best way to get to it? And all these things. And we're just so unaware, a lot of us, about how our bodies work, how our minds work, that, you know, considering we're in this body every single day, so many of us don't even take that time, like even what you've just said, to stop and think about how we are, how we feel. In the mornings, I'm terrible for it. My alarm goes off, I'm immediately out the door, no time to stop. That has changed in recent months, I will admit, but um it's only been recently that I've even started thinking about these things, which is crazy in itself. It sounds like you lead a very relaxed life, William, now.
Well, the reason I'm pausing on that is because one of the things about spiritual development is that as you open up and get more kind of porous and sponge-like to the good vibes, you also become more sensitive to all the bullshit and all the rubbish and the psychic debris that's around. I've always been highly strung. I've described myself as kind of a natural hysteric, right? So I had to learn how to self-manage.
Relate to that.
So I'm kind of I've created in my the final decades of my life, I've created a lifestyle for myself that works.
But it's taking all of that into account.
But at the same time, I am a sensitive geezer, feeling a lot of the negative vibes and stuff that's going on around me. And I've also got, waves of my own karma rolling through. And the work doesn't end. The personal spiritual development doesn't end.
I wanted to ask you about one last thing, because as I said at the beginning, there's so many things that I could ask you about. I noticed one of your videos on your website, and this is a subject that we've talked about already on the Soul Thing. I've talked about it, which is the law of manifestation. There's so many people who are probably going to be listening to this podcast, who want to change their life, want to get things to happen, want to attract the right partner, the right job, and whatever. Now, I know there's a 44-minute video on your website, but can you give us a few pointers on your understanding of manifestation and how people can attract what they want and how it works? Or am I asking a question that's too big for the last question?
No, it's fine. I'm hardcore in terms of the spiritual development. I will be honest with you. I don't care whether people manifest the lives they want or don't, get it or don't get it. The only important thing about being a soul on this planet is to become more loving and more conscious. That's all that matters. Become more loving, more conscious. The relationships, the work, the jobs, the money, they're all aspects of this experiential school which rubs up against us so that we become more loving and more conscious. The laws of manifestation are such that your own soul has the power of the divine in it. It's far more powerful than your personal desires. Your own soul is far more powerful than your desires for a great relationship or whatever it is. So your own soul will be creating for you the feelings and the experiences of the life that you need to be having for your own growth. And when, for example, you find yourself desiring something, the lesson is in the desiring something. Like Buddha says, desire is the source of all suffering. Right? The moment you desire something, you're setting yourself up for a lesson. So I'm
That's really
hardcore about this
interesting.
now. So in terms of manifesting the life you want, manifesting what you want, it's delusional. Maybe 1 in 100,000 people have the karma and the grace and the flow to create what they want through their thinking and thoughts and desire, but that's usually based on a certain karmic life history. Everybody else, forget about manifestation. It's a delusion. It's part of the spell to stop people becoming more loving and more soul infused. So I'm hardcore about this, right?
Yeah, no, I'm great. I'm listening intently.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
That said, if somebody really, really wants something, they need to put themselves into precisely the same vibe as the thing they want. Like if you want a handsome partner, you need to become handsome in the first place. Like attracts like. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does.
And then you have to work at it. I mean, there's nobody I know who's very, very rich who hasn't worked their asses off.
Well,
Unless
it's true.
they've inherited it, right?
Well, it is true.
You know, that's just, so I'm just people need to get real.
Do you know the thing is, William? I'm sitting here and I can't disagree with anything that you've said, which I'm just sitting here nodding constantly because I think that the things you say are just you hit the nail exactly on the head. Our time, William, is almost at an end, but I always like to ask guests who've come on for a final thought or a parting bit of wisdom or something that you can leave us with today.
Right. Well, at this moment, thank you. Number one, it's been an enjoyable conversation.
Oh,
Thank
well,
you.
I'm
I really
glad about
appreciate
that. I
it.
feel the same. That's very good. I'm very glad to hear your feedback.
And you live up the road, so maybe we'll meet anyway for a
Oh,
bevy.
I would love that. Yes, most definitely.
Um, so my parting thing would be to people, I would love everybody who's listening to this to really honor, appreciate, and value those moments when they are just calmly watching the world go by, but their heart's open and they care. And maybe in those moments you're not sure what to do or what's the wisest thing to do, and that's okay. But just being in that vibe of calm, at ease, watchful, heart open, caring. I really want people to value when they're in that state because I think that's the solution to the world's problems. Not everybody be in that state all the time, but everybody has the skills, the tool to go into that state when appropriate, when they need to.
And I think it's really appreciating it because sometimes I've often think this to myself, those moments you do need to really savor because when life's hectic and things are going on that are out of your control, sometimes those moments of just bliss, serenity of feeling that way really need to be appreciated. I was saying that to my friend the other day. I was saying, appreciate the moments when nothing is happening and everything is calm. These are the moments that you should be, savouring forever. William, thank you so much. If you want to find out more about William, you can go to his website, williambloom.com. The website address is in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming onto the Soul Sync.
A great pleasure. Lots of love to you and to everybody who's listening. A great pleasure. Lots of love to you and to everybody who's listening.
I so loved talking to William. I thought he was so nice. And honestly, when I was talking to him, there was so much I could have asked William about. So I really hope I got as much value out of that as I possibly could for all of you. And as always, thank you for joining me on another enlightening episode of Soul Sync. If you want to stay in the loop with the Soul Sync podcast, it's really easy. Just hit the follow show button wherever you listen to your favourite podcast, and then you'll be notified straight away when a new episode comes out. If you want to find out more about my socials, get involved, just go to the show notes where all of the links are there. And do go over to my YouTube channel because there's lots of extra content, and I'm going to be releasing some really nice videos when the sun finally shows itself in England and I can get out and about with my new camera. Thanks for joining me on another episode. Lots of love. Until next week, goodbye.